Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today on Masechtas Nazir daf Lamed, we are going to begin on Lamed Amud Aleph by the Mishnah in the middle of the daf. Masdisin ha'ish megalech al Naziris aviv. We quoted this before, that in the event that the father was a Nazir, there are certain times that we're going to see in the Mishnah in a second, and according to the different girsa, that the son could actually take that money, assuming the father had died, and obviously he didn't bring the karbanos, he can take that money and he can use it for his own nazirs. The son can. So that's only by a son. However, ein ha'ish megalachas al naziris avia. We'll see why, but it says that this is exclusive. This right to the son can do this, can take this money, but not the daughters. Okay. So Ketzad, how do we understand when can he, when can't he? So the Mishnah says, Mishai Aviv Nazir. So you have a situation where the father is a Nazir, and we're actually talking even more specific that not only is the father a Nazir, but also the child was also Nazir. They were both. So V'hifrish Stumin on the Zirasai. And the father took money and he designated it that he was going to bring for the karbanos. But it's most stumim. He didn't explain exactly what money is for what, but we understood that this big lump of money was for the purpose of his karbanos. Umes, and all of a sudden the father died. Now we're going to skip the next line just for a minute based on the different girsas. So we go down to Omer Rav Yossi. Rav Yossi says, Hari Elu Yipul Nadav. This money is given as an Olos Nadava. And therefore, ein ze megalech al nazir saviv. In this situation, the son cannot use this money. Well, why not? What's the problem? So the reason is because since we're talking about a case where not only was the father a nazir, but the son was also a nazir, bechaya av, in the time when his father was alive. So because of that, since he made a neder while the father was still alive, then we see clearly, according to this simple way of reading this Mishnah, that he was already mechuyev in his own karbanos, the son was. So therefore, since he had a chiyuv at the time of his father's life, so therefore because of that, he's not able to use his father's money, and therefore it's yipul nadava. Now let's go back up to the line we skipped. V'amar, let's say instead, Hareni, this second case is not that the son was a Nazir, but now that the father died, now the son says, I'm going to become a Nazir. And he says, Hareni Nazir al manashe goech al mois abba. I'll become a Nazir, but only if I'm allowed to use my father's money that he designated, which of course he died. So since it was mois stumim, do we allow the son to use it? So now let's go back to Ezer Shemigalech. Actually, that line is going to be quoted in a second. Let's continue with the Mishnah as we were. Ezer Shemigalech on the Naziris Aviv. When is he allowed to do this and take his father's money? Mishahaya, and the girsa, it shouldn't say who, the Aviv Nazirim. That's actually, that girsa should have been above. It should say Mishahaya Aviv Nazir. So the girsa above should have been Mishahayahu v'aviv Nazirim. But over here, we're talking about a case where only the father was a Nazir. The Hifrish aviv mois stumin l'nazirusu meis, and he separated the money, and then he died. Now let's go back up. Yom hareini nazir manashe goleach al mois abba. So zehu shemegaleach al naziris aviv. So again, understanding the lashon of the Mishnah is like this. It's all toloi, and when the son became a Nazir. If the son was a Nazir already while the father was alive, so then he would not be able to use this money, rather it would be Yipul Nadava, because he has his own chiyuv on his own. However, if the father died, and then the son made the stipulation, Almanas, that I can use this money, that's the only time I'm going to become a Nazir, so then he's able to use that money. So the Gemara asks the question, my taima. Now, my taima says in the Mafarish, is Ein Ha'isha Megalachas on the Nazirus Aviyah. Why do we say this only a son can do this, but not the daughter? So Rabbi Yochanan Halacha Hi B'Nazir. Says Rabbi Yochanan was saying throughout all of these sugyas, he just says Halacha Moshe Sinai, and therefore, even though it may not necessarily be logical or we understand it, that's the din. It's only the son has the right to do this, but not the daughter. So Pshita. So where it says Pshita says the Mafarish Shaben Megaleach Lo Bas, that the son cannot the daughter. The Ein Lo Bas B'Makam Haben Klum. If you have a son and a daughter, so we know that the son is the one who is Yarish, the Nechse Aviv. He's the one who gets the possessions. He's the one who gets the inheritance. So why would you think that the daughter would have any rights to these things in the event that there's a son? So Madatema the Ben Yarish. So Milo Memra the Ben Yarish is Aviv Baslo. Lotzricha del Eisle El Bas. You're right. If there's a son also, then certainly the daughter, there's no Havamina. But what if there are no sons? There's only a daughter, which means she's going to be Yarish. So Madatema Yarshin Gemurin Law. So why don't we say that Yarshin we learn out from? Says the Mefarish, Megalchin al Nazirus of. She could actually be Megalech by using her father's money. Loshna ben, Loshna bas, but Makam Shein ben. Just like we allow it when it comes to a son, so we'll also allow it in the event that there is no son, that she could do this on behalf with the same rights. With the same rights. If we go weiter, let's look at this rush. It says Ketzah Misha Hayahu Baviv Nazir and Behifresh Aviv Moi Stumim when Nazirus Omer Rav Yosef Hari Il Yipul Nadava Shein Zemagleach Al Nazirus Aviv Dikivan Debachai Aviv Nadar B'Hayushnayim Chayavin B'Karban. So you can see Beferish that the Rush rather, has that girsa that we just said based on the reading of the Mishnah. So again, what if we say maybe the daughter should be able to do it as we continue Lamed Mid Beis? Fine, but Makam Ben, you're right. But maybe when there's no son, she could have the same ability. Kamash Malan Halacha. There's Halacha Mishmisnina that even though she's the only one, there's no sons. Nonetheless, it doesn't work like this. Rather, we Yipul and the Dove in all situations. Okay, which means even if she would make the stipulation, Almanas, that I can use this money to become a Nazir, it doesn't work. Iboilhu. Pligi Rabbana lehad Rav Yossi o lo pligi. The question is, this Mishnah, which again is hard to really read, does Rav Yossi and the Rabbanan, do they actually argue at all? Or are they really just saying the same thing? So if in fact they do argue, what are they arguing on? They're arguing the ratio of the Mishnah, the Sefer of the Mishnah, and we flip the ratio and the Sefer around. So let's look at the Taisus. If you want to tell me that they actually do argue, Meditani b'masnisin Rabbi Yossi Omer. Why does it mention our Mishnah Rabbi Yossi Omer? It must be that it's a different opinion than the Tanakama. Must be the fact that Rabbi Yossi is mentioned. It must be that there is a machlokas, maybe. If let's say there is this machlokas, a reisha to kaim Rabbi Yossi im neder b'chayav. Rabbi Yossi said that if you made a neder while the father was still alive, and therefore you want to become a nazir b'chayav, ein megalech, it doesn't work. Because we said in that situation you have your own chiyuv, and for some reason in that situation, Ram Rabbanan de Megaleach b'chol inyan, that the Rabbanan says doesn't matter. Even b'chayav, we allow you to be able to do this. O sefer the kaimer de nedel acher misa Megaleach on the zero sub of Yom Rabbanan ein Megaleach, or maybe it's the opposite. Maybe when Rav Yossi allows you to do this, make this condition after the father died, and the Rabbanan says you can't do it. So really, it could be totally flip-flop of the two different shitas. So if you want to say that they argue, so Rav Yossi says that b'chayav it doesn't work. So maybe the Rabbanan say even b'chayav you could, for some reason, you could still use this money. Or is it that they argue in the opposite case, that after the father died, Rabbi Yossi says you can use the father's money, and even in that situation, the Rabbanan say you can't. So, Tashma. So I'm going to show you, and Taisa says, Deresha Pligi, that they argue on the ratio, which again we're going to establish over here, is that when Rav Yossi says B'chai Aviv Ein Megaleach, that's actually a machlokas, that the Rabban even allow the son to use that money even while the father's still alive. Tashma, Ketzad Amru Ha'ish Megaleach al Nazirus Aviv. How do we say that when can the son use this money? Mishai Aviv Nazir. So if the father was a Nazir, Hifresh Aviv Moyis Naziruso, and he set aside the money, and he died. V'amar Hareini Nazir, and the boy came after he died and said, Nazir Hareini Nazir al Manash Goleach al Mois Abba. I want to use this money. Zehu Shemagoleach al Mois Aviv. So then, in that situation, the son is allowed to do so, which apparently everyone agrees to that, because after he's already died, then certainly it should be allowed to be done. Aval, that was the seifa. Aval misha hayahuv aviv nazirim. Let's say again we're talking about the time when the father is alive, and the son is also a nazir at that time. V'hifresh aviv mois on nazirsu meis harilu yiplu nadab div Rav Yossi. Rav Yossi says that that money no longer can be used. It's yiplu nadava. The son can't use it. Again, because Pashut is the way the Rosh explained it, is because the son has his own chiyuv. Even in this situation, even in the Reisha, you can be megaleach al mois aviv. So it's a tremendous chiddush. But that's what we're saying, that they do argue, and they argue in the Reisha. Therefore, the Rabbanan are exceedingly lenient in this regard. Question 4: Ketzad haben megaleach al naziris aviv? V'neder b'chayav or le'achar moisai? So le'achar moiso, everyone says yes, the son could use this money on this with this condition they made. B'chai aviv, if he made the neder to be a nazir while the father was still alive, it's actually machlokas the Rabban Rav Yossi and ayin mefarshim why that taka works. If you look in this Tosfos, it says Zehu shemegleach al nazirus aviv of rov soifrim he mishubeshes. So ayin Tosfos. Okay, but that's the pshat. Boy Rabba yeshlo shnei bonim nazira mahu. So we said there's this din that there's one son, so he could make this stipulation. Certainly the Divrei Hakol achar moisai. So what if there's actually two sons over here involved in this situation? It says Tosfos, Rav Yossi. According to Rav Yossi, shenadur achar misas avihim rabbanan gam b'chayavihen. So according to Rav Yossi, if we're talking about after the father died, according to Rabbanan, even while the father is still alive, hilchz gamirin law. Do we say this halach mishmasinai? Kol de kadim galeach galach. Anyone who is first comes first. It says Tosfos v'chol hakaydim mehen zach mehen, and therefore all that money is used by the first one who chaps harayin. Oh, Dilma Yerusha Gamrin in law Upal Gahabi. Or maybe we should say that it's like a Yerusha, and let's say we're not talking about a Bechor. So you have you have a daughter, then two sons. So then the din is that they split everything evenly. So if that's the case, so maybe this money is also split evenly. That's one question. Boy Rava, that was a Rabbah. Now Rava poses a different question. Bechor pashut mai. What's the din if you have a Bechor who normally gets pishnaim, he gets double the amount. Again, if it's tali and Yerusha, so maybe he gets double. Mai. Hilchz gemrin in the law, it's a halach mashninai, v'hilkach lo boy galuchi lefum mai deshakel. And he doesn't need to be galuach on that which he took. O Dilma Yerushahi, it's a Yerusha, v'chi heicha deshakel pishnayim hachi migaleach. So we know that since it's in Yerusha, that he's able to take for the pishnayim. Says the Mefarsh. That the father's money can be taken by the son, and not because of Yerusha, and therefore he doesn't have to be galeach based on what he took. Palga, he takes half. Dilmi Yerushahi, it is Yerusha. Shemegalchem Nazir Savihin, v'chihecha the shakol hai b'chor pishnayim b'chol hanachasim. Hacha b'hainami megoyach b'shnayim. So the question basically is it a din Yerusha? If it's a din Yerusha, then the Bechor should be able to get 2/3, and the other one will get 1/3. The imtim saloimer. So that's that question. Let's look at question 5 here. A boy the Gemara. Im nazir shemagoyach al naziris aviv mekoyach hilchasahi or mekoyach Yerusha. So is it halach mashmasina? Is it Yerusha? And what's the nafkamina? So we said first of all, if there's 2 sons, do we say whoever comes first is first? Or is it divided evenly? And the second question is, we saw by Bechor and a Pashit, whether or not he gets 2/3 like a Yerusha, or it's also split. Dimtim solem Yerusha, and therefore the Bechor gets double. Maybe we say it's only by Chulin that he gets double. But since the son, as we said, is able to take that which is the father's, so maybe we're not going to make a distinction whether it's hektish or chulin. Says the Mefarsh. After you makar b'karban umavakshin l'ochloi, and you want to eat it, l'shakol pishnayim el cholkin b'neihem b'shav. It should be divided evenly. Just like he'll get double portion for the karbanos. After it's divided up, he'll still get double. Fine. So that's another question. And then the Gemara continues. Aviv Nazir Oilam. Let's say the father was a Nazir Oilam. Vahu Nazir Stam. And the child that makes the statement is a Nazir Stam. So they're not even the same level of Nazirus, or for that matter, the other way around. Of the Nazir Stam, who Nazir Oilam, my. Maybe the only time we said that the son could do this is only when it comes to the father being Stam Nazirus. Odilma Lushna. Maybe we don't make any distinction. It doesn't make any difference whether or not the father, they're different levels of being a Nazir. Maybe the din is the same. And then finally, the imtim saloimer hacha idin naziris tahara. So maybe you can say, well, both of them, fine. One is Nazir Olam, is Nazir Stam, but it's Naziris tahara. So boy Ravashi aviv Nazir Tami v'hu Nazir Tahar. What if the reason for the karbanos are different reasons? The father was Tameh, and this child's a Nazir Tahar, and the other way around, Tar aviv v'hu Nazir Tahar, or aviv Nazir Tahar v'hu Nazir Tami mai Teku. So all these different questions, the boy the lo ifshita. Okay. Let's just see a couple questions here. Question 4 we saw TA5, which I got completely wrong. Haben megoyach on the zeros of it. Im haben ha'av haben einam ba'oisin naziros. They're not the same type of nazirus. That's what it means. So Havi boydel ifshita. Be'el ufanim hasafik. What exactly is the situation where they are not exactly the same? So now I understand the question. I didn't understand what it was asking before. And the answer is, if one of them was a Nazir Oil, one was a Nazir Stam, or one was a Nazir Tahar, one was a Nazir Tameh. Hadr nolach mish amar, hanlach mish amar, hanlach mish amar. And we are going to tomorrow continue with the next parak. Beishami Omrim Hektish Tois Hektish Adkan.